President Trump has the most corrupt administration in modern history. $2 billion cryptocurrency scandal, pay-to-play pardons, pardoning January 6 insurrectionists, an Epstein pedophile cover-up, White House ballrooms that are lavish, and the Trump family getting rich off of official U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and beyond. And when the national media like CBS, ABC, and NBC cover these egregious scandals or use satire, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr tried to crush them using his power as FCC chairman. CBS covers the cryptocurrency corruption, pardon of the Binance founder. Then CBS is forced to install a bias monitor 2 days after the merger approval, under pressure from Carr and Trump, along with an extortion payment of $16 million. ABC's Jimmy Kimmel uses satire to criticize Trump. Carr threatens their license. NBC's Seth Meyers uses satire to criticize Trump. Chairman Carr echoes Trump's call for Meyers' ouster. Chairman, you've turned the FCC into Trump's attack dog to crush First Amendment rights through FCC extortion. The Chinese Communist Party would be impressed. There was a time when you passionately defended First Amendment rights. In fact, you and I tangoed over COVID and issues related to that. So how do you justify using the FCC to censor news and satire of Trump's rampant corruption?
Have an obligation to operate in the public interest. And in 2021,
is it not the public interest
right here to the FCC asking us to take action when there's a transaction pending at the FCC involving a Spanish language radio station in South Florida?
Is it not in the public interest for
FCC
people to know about the corruption that's happening in this administration?
Step in and say, to win in 2022, this must stop. Pressuring the FCC to block a sale because Democrats thought it would be bad for
reclaiming my time. You serve the American people. What is that issue? Is blatant corruption by the Trump administration and you trying to hide it. And everybody knows it. Commissioner Gomez, one day Chairman Carr's reign of un-American censorship will be over. How do we restore public confidence in the FCC after this national censorship scandal?
Oh, thank you for that question. I think Congress can really help us here by putting guardrails on the FCC so that it cannot violate the First Amendment and censor content on broadcasters.
And what do you think those guardrails should be?
I think defining the public, what it means to serve in the public interest would be very helpful.
Do you think highlighting corruption is in the public interest?
I think the FCC should stay out of content, whether we like it or not. And that is the problem, is this administration wants to retaliate against news organizations that have the temerity to report factually about this administration.
Well, the history books will not be kind to that. It's been over a year since Trump took office, and we still don't have rural broadband in rural communities like mine and others. You came to my district a while back in Orlando to hear from veterans who utilize internet to help with their health care. What has the effect been of the BEAD program still not being rolled out across America with regard to consumers?
Yes, it is so important for us to be able to participate in this economy today, the digital economy, to have access to affordable broadband. And the communities that don't have that are getting further and further left behind. And as you know, when we came, we were talking about the Affordable Connectivity Program and how important that was to veterans to be able to make their meetings and their health care appointments without having to, in fact, travel. It saved them days of painful travel. So we need to focus on this issue so that every American can have access to affordable and accessible broadband, especially if we want to be world leaders in artificial intelligence. And it is so important.
And what happens to rural businesses, farms, ranches when they don't have access to high-speed broadband?
If you don't have access to high-speed broadband, you really are at risk of being left behind. It is an imperative in today's economy, in this digital economy, to have access to broadband.
Thanks, Chairman. I yield back.
Thanks, gentleman. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Commission for being with us today. Chairman Carr, Commissioner Gomez, and Commissioner Trusty, and congratulations. It's great since you've been in my office years back to follow your career. Congratulations. Chairman Carr, let me just start off. With the BEAD program, how much shovels in the ground were there in the Biden administration?
The BEAD program was President Biden's $42 billion plan to connect millions of Americans to high-speed internet. And after over 1,000 days of the Biden administration implementing it, not a single shovel's worth of dirt was turned. Now, President Trump and Secretary Lutnick and NTI Administrator Roth have come in and they've turned that program around, and we're finally going to be seeing dirt turning and Americans getting connected.
So I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. Nothing happened in the Biden administration. Let me turn to another topic I know that you and I talked about through the years, especially when we had this Spectrum Authority auction lapse. Because how far did we fall behind in this country when we didn't have that authority to sell spectrum? And the other question I'd like to ask is this, because it's always one of the things that we always worry about. How much money did we lose in that time frame from not being able to have that auction authority?
Yeah, during the Biden administration, the FCC's Spectrum Auction Authority lapsed for the very first time ever, and that enabled other countries, China and others, to leapfrog the United States. We fell several hundred megahertz behind them. But thankfully, this Congress came together, President Trump came together, and passed a working families tax cut that created a strong pipeline of 800 megahertz. And again, every time you bring spectrum online, that drives down prices for consumers, and so that's what we're doing right now.
Oh, sorry, I understood that correctly. It was during the Biden administration that authority lapsed. Let me ask you another question, because this just came in. I know that we talked about this for years, and I worked on legislation on robocalls and trying to protect the public out there. And I know that in reading your testimony that the commission wants to move forward and make sure that we protect people out there from these robocalls that people are getting.
Well, thank you. Robocalls obviously are our number one consumer complaint, and right now we're building on the long-term bipartisan work of the agency on this. One thing we're doing is historically the FCC would focus on a very small number of robocallers that generate a lot of calls, and they would fine them hundreds of millions of dollars, but those fines would largely go uncollected. And what we're doing now is we're picking up on something we did in the last administration, which is to kick providers out of our robocall mitigation database if they're not doing enough to fight illegal robocalls. And that effectively cuts them off from the U.S. telephone network. And more generally, we're going at every single portion of the life cycle of illegal robocalls and making it harder for the bad actors to get their calls through, including we're looking particularly at foreign-originated illegal robocalls.
Well, I know the American public out there is going to appreciate your work on that, because I know I just got a call the other day from a constituent that had problems with robocalls coming into their business. Commissioner Trusty, you know where I'm from and what my area looks like. And there's areas out there, of course, that we don't have broadband. And I know I worked years back making sure that we had accurate maps before we'd spend money to make sure that dollars were spent. And in your testimony, you talk about some of the things you're really focusing on. And one of the things I think it's really important you talk about is when we talk about rural health care and telehealth. And I know when I'm in my rural hospitals, they can't afford to have a lot of different programs, you might say, or docs doing certain procedures, or especially on the mental health side. Could you just elaborate a little bit on the mental health side and the telehealth side?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. As you know, the Rural Healthcare Program ensures that rural patients have access to modern quality healthcare, including telehealth. And the FCC has made some process improvements to improve access to this essential program by extending the application deadline, by making sure funding aligns with demands. And we've been able to roll over unused funds for this year, for 2025, to ensure that we increase access to this important service. I think as part of the USF Congressional Working Group, there's another opportunity to explore additional reforms that can be made to this program to ensure that Americans in rural communities across the country have access to the quality care that they need.
Well, thank you. If I could just return to you, Commissioner Carr, just real quickly, because we had discussions when we talked about 4G, 5G, 6G, and I'd always ask this question: are we winning the race? I mean, you know, who's our competitor out there? We got to win this race. So, are we winning this race out there when we talk about 6G?
We are. We had fallen behind, in my view, during the Biden years, and now we've hit the accelerator, and we are going to be leading the world once again in next generation technology.
Thank you very much. My time has expired, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chair, now recognize the representative from New York, Ms. Clark, for 5 minutes for your questions.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman Hudson, Ranking Member Matsui, for convening this hearing. Given the actions of the FCC under Chairman Carr, it's long overdue. Less than 1 year into his tenure, the FCC under Chairman Carr has given this committee many worthy avenues of exploration and oversight, most of which appear to stem from his new role as an obsequious partisan fulfilling President Trump's desire to exact revenge on his perceived enemies and line the pockets of the oligarch class. While appearing before this committee less than 4 years ago under the Biden administration, then Commissioner Carr rightly acknowledged the independence of the FCC, free from executive branch interference, but recently made clear that under the Trump administration, that independence is gone. While this may seem like a shocking about-face, it shouldn't be that surprising given Mr. Carr's role as author of the horrific Project 2025 manifesto, as well as the frankly bizarre choice to wear a golden lapel pin bearing President Trump's face. The weaponization of the FCC under Chairman Carr is not just frustrating, but dangerous. Dangerous for the nation and the ideals upon which it was founded. Individuals' freedom of speech and a press corps free from political intimidation are vital to a democracy. It's what also allows informed citizens to speak their minds without fear of government reprisal and serves as an important check on those in power. Unfortunately, these ideals are lost under this iteration of the FCC, which appears bound to the whims of a president intent on punishing those who report accurately on his unsettling behavior. Because my time is limited, I can't possibly list every example of the weaponization of the FCC in the last year, but a few that come to mind include reinstating complaints against news organizations that were critical of Trump during the election while failing to reinstate a petition filed against the president's media outlet of choice, Fox. Ordering baseless investigations into NPR and PBS, using mergers to extract political revenge, and more, such as withholding approval of the Paramount Skydance merger until Trump's personal lawsuit was settled with financial payment. Launching a ridiculous investigation into KCBS in San Jose for merely reporting on ICE activity in their own community. Threatening to unilaterally alter national media ownership limits, which would reduce diversity in media and further endanger local news. Overtly partisan reinterpretations of the FCC's public interest standard and news distortion policies to enact a regime of censorship. And most notably, the overt threatening of licenses of broadcasters for carrying Jimmy Kimmel Live's show. To the last point, Senator Cruz, who I rarely agree with, aptly described Chairman Carr's threats as akin to something out of a mafia movie. And let me just say, I don't see any Michael Corleones in this room today, only Alfredo. So my question is to Commissioner Gomez. For nearly 90 years, the FCC has functioned as an independent agency to insulate communications policy from political pressure. Can you explain why the FCC's independence is essential to its credibility and effectiveness, and what potential risks arise as that independence is eroded?
Thank you for that question. You know, when Congress created our predecessor, the Federal Radio Commission, it considered putting the commission under the Department of Commerce. And Herbert Hoover at the time said it was a terrible idea because it was dangerous to have the regulator of the most important communications medium at the time being overseen by a single person. And so that's why it created an independent agency. It's important to have an independent agency because we must be seen as an expert body that makes decisions based on that expertise and not based on the political whims of one administration.
Commissioner Gomez, how do FCC media ownership caps support diversity of viewpoints and locally focused news? And what do communities risk losing if these limits are weakened?
Our core principles when we talk about the public interest in local broadcasting are localism, diversity of viewpoints, and competition. The caps ensure that we have multiple voices in every market. That is why we have them. We want to ensure that we have that. If we lose those caps, what we are going to lose is that diversity of viewpoints, and we risk having one voice funneling all the information to our voters.
Subscribe to One India and never miss an update. Download the One India app now.